Brenda Louise Condon was a 28-year-old from State College, Pennsylvania. She was a divorced mother of two and had her own business. In the early morning hours of February 27, 1991, in Bellefonte, Brenda was the lone bartender at a place where she had just gotten part-time work. When employees came in the next day, the bar was unlocked. Her car was still there, but there were no signs of Brenda. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. During the previous year, all of us, we in the United States, and you wherever you are, have really gotten to know what it's like to be by ourselves, or at least around a lot fewer people, either by choice or by force, due to COVID-19. And as many reports and studies have shown, this has not been easy for a lot of people. Suicides are up, mental health issues are up, violence is up. Why? Because we, well, not all of us, are social animals. We're more like elephants and less like bears. Humans need the interaction, the trading of ideas and emotions, the camaraderie, to keep our sophisticated minds from spinning off into dark places. It's why isolation is one of the most severest punishments in our prisons. Yet, we also realize that working, playing, lounging by ourselves can have its health benefits as well. Well, in the disappearance of Brenda Condon, she had to work the night shift and then close up at 2 a.m. all by herself. Then she was gone. And we're left to figure out who caused Brenda's disappearance, due to her being left alone. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charleyproject.org. Brenda Condon lived a lot in her 28 years. Her mother died when she was very young, so her older sister kind of became her mother. Brenda then got married at the age of 16 to a guy 10 years older. They had 2 children, but the relationship ended in divorce in her early 20s. Yet that didn't get Brenda down. She started her own house cleaning business in the State College area, and that was going well. Well enough that Brenda had time to pick up a few hours at a local tavern, Carl's Bad Tavern. Yes, really, as a bartender. She only had the job for a few days before disappearing. The only downside at the time of her disappearance, and it's a big one, was that Brenda continued to be in a relationship in which the man was abusive. So, on the evening of February 26, 1991, in Bellefonte, Brenda was just a few days into her new job at the tavern, but the owner, Carl, decided she could work all on her own. When closing time came at 2 a.m. February 27th, Brenda was to clean, write up the bank deposit, leave it in its proper place, then lock everything up. Brenda was then to come back in 8 hours to reopen the tavern for that day's business. However, when the swing shift employee showed up to relieve her, Brenda wasn't there. Her car was in the parking lot, there were a couple glasses with money on the bar, and, strangely, Brenda's boots were in the men's restroom. She was never seen again. Law enforcement would eventually decide, given the totality of the evidence, that Brenda disappeared around closing time at 2 a.m. and not when she came in to reopen 8 hours later. Although Unfound has only covered one other case in which a woman disappeared from her workplace, Julie Weflin, this is not an unusual occurrence. Some of you may even remember the disappearance of Jessica Haringa for example. Thus, this gives us a chance to find new information regarding Brenda's case, while also learning more about this type of disappearance. And we start with these 3 questions. Number 1, is there any way to logically explain why Brenda's boots would be in the men's restroom? Number 2, even though her abusive boyfriend was allegedly 15 miles away, is it possible that somehow he showed up at the tavern without being seen? And number 3, does one of the sketches look like a serial killer who dumped a body in the area of the tavern just 2 years after Brenda's disappearance? Brenda's family certainly believes foul play occurred. However, they realize that a few different men could have committed the crime. The guest for this episode is Brenda's sister, Iris Myers. Unfound news. 48 hours, 48 hours, 48 hours. Yes, it's true. Unfound got some prominent attention during last Saturday's episode, in which they covered Janelle Matthews' murder. I had no idea that was going to happen. If you'd like to hear my insights regarding Unfound's inclusion in the coverage, please go find the Unfound Live Show for March 31st, 2021 on our YouTube channel. Next, Unfound on the Ground for premium Patreon members got canceled this past Monday due to weather that had the potential to knock out the power in the area where the program originates. It has thus been moved to this coming Monday, April 5th at 8:45 p.m. Eastern. I hope everyone that is eligible will take part. The topic: why people go missing. Finally, yes, that was the newsletter you got in your inbox yesterday, April 1st. If you did not get it, that means you aren't on the email list. If you'd like to be on the list, please contact me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com, where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com, or you can track down my assistant Heather in the Facebook group. Playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/Unfound Podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please, mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Brenda Condon, Iris Myers. Iris, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Now, the listeners should know that Iris and I actually got to meet, I guess, about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, and it was really a pleasure to sit down and talk with her about Brenda. Iris and I have known each other for a little while now, so it was good to meet her in person. And so I feel like, Iris, I kind of know you maybe even better than I do because I haven't gotten to meet most of my guests. So I appreciate you being on the program.
Well, thank you. And it was a pleasure meeting you in person and actually learn more about what you do with these programs.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. We sat down, I think it was at a Jimmy John's right over here near me. And we sat there and ate, and we must have sat there for a couple hours. It was, I really enjoyed it. Yes.
Yeah.
So
many things to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. We had a lot to talk about. That's certainly true. And Iris, This, of course, is a disappearance that occurred in Pennsylvania, and Iris is from Pennsylvania. So, you are Brenda's sister. Let's talk a little bit just about Brenda in general. You her older sister, younger sister? How did you two get along? What was your relationship like? Let's start there.
Well, I was the only sister and the oldest sister. And our mother died when Brenda was only 3. I was 15. So at that time, my little sister kind of became my own little daughter, as
Wow.
you know, because Grandma would watch her while our dad was at work. But after that, then when I wasn't in school or I wasn't working myself, then I was babysitter for Brenda. So she grew up with me more as a mother than a
Wow.
sister.
Wow. And how was that? How was that for you and her? Especially maybe when she did get older. Of course, you're both aging at the same rate there, but a few years older, but being kind of a mother figure, and did that continue to like when she became a teenager, or what?
Oh no, it continued through even until she got married at 16.
Wow.
But she babysat for me. She lived with me for many times after I had gotten married. And it was easier for her to live with me, and then she would babysit for me.
Uh-huh.
And so we got along like sisters, but we also got along like mothers and daughters. So
Uh-huh.
it was a different situation than most people, I think, grow up with.
Yeah, right. So, it's very sad with your mother dying, of course, but you being like a mother figure, I mean, were you ever in a position where you like had to discipline Brenda or anything, or was that still up to your father? I mean, how far did that go?
That was still up to Dad, unless she happened to be with me and she did something that I didn't like or didn't approve of.
Uh-huh.
Then it was, it wasn't sister, it was mother
Well,
daughter type
okay.
thing.
Do you and Brenda have any other siblings?
We have 3 brothers,
Oh, three
which
brothers.
of course, yeah,
Wow.
Brenda was the youngest
The baby.
child.
The baby.
Yeah.
So 5
Hmm.
kids. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And being that you're both two young women, would you say that you and Brenda similar personalities, or how would you compare and contrast her to you? Two different kinds of people, or how would you explain it?
No, we were very much alike, very outgoing, um,
Mm-hmm.
very curious about things as far as the outside world. Um, as she was growing up, and of course I was being older, I wanted to go to concerts, maybe
Yeah.
in Pittsburgh or State College.
Yeah.
Well, I would take Brenda along to the concerts with me. And that was not,
Uh-huh.
most kids didn't get to do that.
Right.
But here's, my little sister, and hey, I want to go to a concert. So I take her with me. And she enjoyed them, and again, that was kind of like a more of a sister type outing. And we used to go
Sure.
shopping together. We used to go to take as she got older, and with my kids, and then she had hers. We used to take them to Ligonier, to an amusement park,
Been there.
and different things that we would do together with her and I and the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my oldest son was born on March the 1st, which was her birthday.
Huh. Well, that was neat.
So we celebrated the 2 birthdays together. And when she had disappeared, she was supposed to be at my house on Saturday morning
Right.
because March the 1st was the day that we would celebrate my oldest son's birthday and hers. And her kids would come to my house also.
Yeah, right. And we'll certainly talk about how, of course, she did not show up on that March 1st, how that all transpired.
Right.
I do have to ask you, you're taking her to some music, some concerts down in the Pittsburgh area. Of course, Bellefonte is not close to Pittsburgh, but I can understand maybe Pittsburgh may be the closest big city. What concerts did you take her to see? I think listeners would love to know. Do you remember some?
Oh, yeah. Conway Twitty. Loretta Lynn, the Statler Brothers, because in the 70s, that's when the country music was pop. So and they took buses from Clearfield, where we lived.
Yeah.
So we just, jump on the bus and off to the concert. They drop you off at the gate, and they pick you up at the gate. So whatever concert hall that they were at. I took her to Danny O'Donnell.
So mostly country stuff, mostly country music then.
It was mostly country, yeah.
Okay. Now, as she got older, became a teenager, what were some of her personal hobbies and interests? What did Brenda find, on her own, interests that she was into maybe in school? Boys. Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. Forgive the pun. Okay.
As a teenager, she babysat for me, so that took up her evenings or her weekends, depending on what time of the day I was working, that she could babysit for me. And she had a couple of girlfriends, and they would do things together. As teenagers do, they would go to the bowling alley and hang out. They would go downtown, excuse me, and hang out together and ride around in cars. And like I said, they like the boys.
Yeah, right. Okay, all right. Well, we have to move on to this, and this is probably earlier than we usually talk about such a topic on Unfound, especially considering the woman's age, because she got married at 16.
Yes.
Very young. I think, especially, late 70s, early 80s. Maybe back at some point in prior history, 16 years old was a common age to get married, but late 20th century, I think it's fairly unique. What brought that on for Iris and getting married to Thomas? How did you feel about that? What was your attitude being her mother figure? How did that all come about?
Well, I do not believe in abortion. And it was a case of where Tom wanted to marry her and everything and make everything legit. So, hey, you've grown up, and now you take the responsibility for your actions, and whatever you need, if you need something, come to me. I will help you, whatever I can do. And she enjoyed the married life.
Oh, okay.
And then after Todd, then 2 years later, she had Shauna.
Okay, so she got married at 16. She was pregnant with her and Thomas's child at 16.
Right.
And then 2 years later, I guess at 18, she had her daughter.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you say even though she was 16, your impression is she liked married life.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
she enjoyed the kids.
She did.
She wanted to do all kinds of stuff for the kids because she was their mother, and she grew up without a mother.
Yeah.
In her formative years, the mother was not there. I was the mother figure for her, but I'm only 15, 16 years old myself.
Yeah,
so
right. Right. That's right. Okay. And how old was Thomas?
I believe he was 26. He was like
Okay,
10 years
so
older than what
wow,
Brenda was.
so considerably older.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so she has a son, she has a daughter, but this marriage, from what I understand, I have in my notes, did not last, till when she disappeared, of course, in 1991. In your opinion, what happened there? How long did their marriage last? I mean, they're young, she's young. Maybe that's a factor, but the way you see it, what happened?
I think the age difference and the fact that it didn't turn out to be the type of married life that she thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that even though she loved those kids, she was forced to grow up very quickly.
Yeah.
And she didn't have those teenage years to do the things that most teenagers do.
Yeah.
Because she had a baby, she had a husband, she had a house to take care of. And as a result, I think that was what caused the problems in the marriage. Because she did everything she could do for the kids, and I would take my kids, she would take her kids, and we would go different places. And if she and Tom wanted to go somewhere, I would babysit Todd and Shauna for them, and they would babysit my kids for me. So the kids weren't left with just any babysitter. She was particular about that.
Yeah. And so how long did this marriage last, the way you remember it, Iris?
Oh, I'm thinking it was about 1985.
Okay. So about 6 years, maybe?
Yeah.
I'm just doing the calculations real quickly in my head. She was, of course, 28 when she disappeared in 91. So 85,
right.
6, so that would be like 22. She got married at 16, so I'm just doing those calculations very quickly.
Right,
Okay. All right, so she's married to Thomas, 6 years. That's longer than a lot of marriages last, even for people who get married who are much older. So, I guess we can't look too poorly upon it. Okay. And what would she do? Did she have a job during this, or was Tom working? She stayed at home during those years. What was going on with her work and education, etc.?
Once the kids got a little bit older, she went to work as a cashier at a hardware store. And they asked, I think about a year. Then after got a divorce, then she started a cleaning company in Williamsport.
Okay.
She and her girlfriends would go out on the weekends to different bars where this one particular band was playing, and that is where she met boyfriend Greg.
Okay.
Who she was living with at the time that she disappeared in 91.
All right, and we will surely get to that very soon. So I just want to kind of fill in maybe some of the little gaps there. So 6 years of marriage, they get divorced. We're just going to say around 1985. If it's 84 or 86, I'm not going to worry too much about that, but that's close enough just to give the listeners an idea. I mean, how were they, Tom and Brenda, when they split up? Did they have joint custody? Were they okay with each other after that? How would you say they got along for the kids after?
They were very good friends. She had moved to Laurel Sock, which is outside of Williamsport, and she had an apartment there. The kids went with her for a while, but they didn't. They were used to living in the country in a house, not an apartment complex. So they decided to live with their dad. So then she would get them like every weekend, and they would go stay at the apartment with her in Laurelstock, but they just didn't like that. And then once she started seeing Greg on a regular basis, then she had moved in with him. So she would come and pick up the kids, and then they would go to State College because that's where he lived in an apartment.
Okay. All right. So I guess what you're saying here is there wasn't, as we all know as adults, that custody battles, things like that happen. I guess what you're saying is there wasn't something like that when Tom and Brenda got divorced?
No. They did not argue and fight over the kids. The choice was the kids to where they wanted to live. And they were quite happy spending the week long and going to school at their dad's and then seeing their mom on the weekends. And then they did occasionally, whenever Brenda wasn't coming to pick them up on the weekends, they would come and stay with me on the weekends.
Okay.
So they, between their dad and myself and their mom, they were always with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And they also spent time with their grandparents on their father's side.
Okay. All right. So it sounds to me like Brenda and Tom made a good job of it, did a good job of it, making sure these kids were supported and loved, and no bickering, as we know can happen between divorced parents, bad mouthing the other.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't sound like this was happening here.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think it happened at all. No.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is what went on after they got divorced. You said that she started this house cleaning job with some of her friends, did you say? With some of her friends?
She had people working for her.
Oh, wow.
No, her friends weren't in.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No.
All right, so she had people working for her. So cleaning like homes and maybe small offices, things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've already mentioned him, but let's now talk about him. So she gets divorced in roughly 1985. Of course, she went missing in 1991. You've mentioned this guy. His name is Greg Palazzari.
Right.
Palazzari. And you said that they met at a local bar or something like that. How did you feel about that? Had you ever heard of Greg before? Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
I didn't know anything about Greg. I knew she had a boyfriend, but I did not know and did not meet him. She would stop at my house on occasion through the week. Maybe she came up to see the kids or something, and she didn't have a cleaning job, or she was cleaning in Clearfield because she also had still kept the cleaning jobs in Clearfield that she had. And she would have maybe a black eye, maybe black and blue marks on her arms. And I would ask her about it. She says, the broom hit me, or, the broom fell over, the mop fell over. It's like, Brenda, I know better, but for whatever reason, you're not telling me something. So I just let it go because I figured that in time, everything would come out.
Yeah.
But it didn't until the night that I had to sign missing persons papers. That's when I met Greg, the boyfriend. And at that time, I understood why she never introduced the two of us, because she knew I would never have approved of him for her at all.
Okay. If you could just, once again, I realize you had your own life to live, you had kids at the time, but could you remember what year Greg and she first started dating? We already stated that they were dating at the time of her disappearance, but do you know how long they were a couple?
I'm thinking it was probably 1989.
All right, so at least a couple years. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. So
he was in a band.
He was in a band. Okay.
He was in a band, so she and her girlfriends would follow the band. Wherever the bands were, that's where they would go for Friday night or Saturday night.
Okay. So she meets him. Maybe she went to see him sometime, and that's how they met, at a bar or something like that. Could be. We don't know, but they were a couple. She moved in with him. But I guess what you're saying is she never really brought him around.
No.
And you didn't meet him until after she went missing.
Right.
Okay. And besides playing in this band, what did Greg do for work? What was his story of, what was his career or whatever?
Greg's Sunoco gas station on University Drive in State College. He pumped gas and he worked on cars. In the background, he dealt drugs. And the police told me this. They knew it. They just didn't catch him or didn't want to.
Okay.
Until later.
And maybe we should just say this right now. Greg Palazzari is no longer alive. He's dead. He's been dead for a while now.
Correct.
All right. So
yes.
We can afford to speak about him in more frank terms maybe than we would if he were still alive. So, okay. So Greg and Brenda are a couple. He does this work, allegations that he had doing some little illegal activity there, which might not be hard to believe. And you've also stated that, once again, you never saw it happen, but your belief is at the time that Brenda was being abused by Greg.
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. And did her children, I'm not sure how old they would have been in maybe 1990, but did the kids ever say anything to you or, about Greg being mean to them? Did they ever mention him, Greg?
No.
Kids?
No.
Okay.
Not until whenever I went, and the kids went with me, and so did a lady by the name of Bobby, who was from the Victim's Witness Office in Center County. When we went to Greg's apartment to get Brenda's things.
Okay.
Which was her clothes and things that, normal things that you would have when you were living somewhere.
Right. Okay, so once again, you're saying this didn't happen until after she went missing.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about one more issue, because we need to talk about how she ended up getting this job at a place called Carl's. That's CARL''S, Carl's Bad Tavern. So not one word like Carlsbad, California, but Carl's space Bad Tavern. And this was owned by a guy's name was Carl Easterling. How did Brenda end up working there? And of course, this is the place that she went missing from. So how did she end up working there, and how long had she worked there?
Okay. Carl and Greg were best of friends. And Brenda it was too far for her to drive down to Williamsport from State College. So she just wanted to stay in State College in Clearfield and do the housekeeping or house cleaning. And Carl needed a bartender. So he hired Brenda to work on Saturday night for training.
Okay.
And then she worked on Monday night, and that's when she disappeared, was Monday night into early Tuesday morning.
So she disappeared from, once again, she was working there that night. She had only been working there a very, very, very short time.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I think this will be important for the listeners to remember. I think that's something that really sticks out to me as well. Would you say that Carlsbad Tavern, the place, maybe had a shady reputation?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you know that did Brenda ask you for advice, or did she let you know that she was going to be getting this job there? Did you two talk about it, anything like that, before she started working there?
We did. It was a very quick conversation because I had tended bar myself and happened to be tending bar at the time that she disappeared. And I told her, I said, yeah, take the job because it's good money.
Mm-hmm.
Tending bar, you've got the personality, and people like you. You can do very well with it, but you have to work nights.
Yeah.
And she sort of like wanted to follow in my footsteps.
Mm.
So the bar job was like, great. I can do this. I can live in State College. I can see my kids more often because she was so much closer to them.
Okay. And so you did talk to her about it. She decided she was going to work there, maybe even despite the shady reputation, etc. But she had only been working there like a week before she went missing.
No, she worked Saturday night.
Yeah.
And then she went in on Monday night to work.
2 days.
And that's when 2 days, yeah.
2 days, less than a week. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And I had, when I met Greg then the following Friday night, I had said to him, I said, why weren't you here to meet her and to pick her up and take her home? Because she was living with him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he didn't have a driver's license. He would have to ride his bicycle there. And it probably was maybe 15 miles from his house. But the bars that I tended bar at, either the husbands, the boyfriend, or the bar owner made sure that you got to your car and you got down the road.
Okay.
And like a lot of times, boyfriends or husbands would drop you off at work and then because you're talking at 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
You're getting out of there. And Greg said, oh, that was too far. He didn't have a license. And it's like, but this is boyfriend, girlfriend, and you're going to leave her out here in the middle of nowhere? And that was, to me, was very, very strange.
Okay, well, the listeners will note that. Let's just go over that day of February 27th, 1991. What do you know about, of course, we know that Brenda eventually went to work, but do we know what she did earlier in the day? Do you remember the last time you spoke to her? And I even have in my notes that on that day of February 27th, she had gotten some money, I guess, from your aunt. What was that money for? Can you go through February 27th for the listeners?
Okay. She was at my house on Monday, and she had talked to my son. He was there, and she wrote me a note, and she says, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And she left my house and went to the car garage where where our aunt worked, and she borrowed money from her and talked to her for a little while and said she'd be back in a couple of days to pay her back. And then she left, and that was it. Nobody heard anything from her then until, Friday night when the police called me to inform me that they wanted to know where my sister was, and I did not know. I hadn't talked to her, but she would be at my house on Saturday morning because we always celebrated her birthday and my son's birthday together. And that's when they informed me that she was missing and had been missing since Monday night.
After you saw her.
And that Greg, the boyfriend, never told the police until Friday night about me being her sister.
Do you know what that money was for? Why, it seems to me, just once again, from my standpoint, of course, I did not know Brenda, but she has this work, cleaning houses and then working at a bar. Why was she asking for money from your aunt?
I don't really know what I did at the time, but I've forgotten now.
Mm-hmm.
But she was good at getting speeding tickets, and she would come to me to borrow the money to pay the speeding ticket with, and then a couple of days later, she'd bring me my money back.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it was kind of a common thing for her because of these speeding tickets that she got all the time.
Okay. All right, so are you saying then, of course, we have to realize that we just passed the 30-year anniversary. It is then your standpoint, we're doing this interview on March 24th, 2021, that money could have been for a speeding ticket she got at some point. It could be. We don't know that, but it's a possibility.
It's a possibility, but nothing ever came in the mail for her about a ticket. So I don't know.
Okay. All right. So she'd gone this money. We don't know. Maybe it's connected to her disappearance from, maybe not. Just not sure, but it's something to think about. So she goes to work, and like you said, you did not even know. This is Monday, February 27th, so the 28th. Of course, 1991 was not a leap year. So we have March 1st, which would have been that Wednesday. Correct? Right. So that would have been her birthday, right. That Wednesday. And, of course, she does not show up. You even stated that, son was also born on March 1st. And you didn't hear from her, and that was very unusual. What did you think right at that moment before, of course, you found out when she didn't show up, you didn't hear from her? What was your first reaction?
I just figured that she had gotten into something and went somewhere, and that I'd definitely see it Saturday morning, because that's what we had planned on to celebrate, because during the week everybody works and Kent was in school, my son. Mm-hmm. So it was just easier, and for her kids to celebrate on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so that's why it was put off till Saturday. Thank you for explaining that, because Correct. We know March 1st was a Wednesday in 1991. Okay, thank you. All right, so then you've already kind of talked about it a little bit already about not finding out for a few days, but where were you? What were you doing? Who told you that, you know what, Brenda went to work on Monday night, and then, her car was still there Tuesday morning, and she was gone? How did you find out about that?
Spring Township Police Department called me, asked me if I was Iris Myers and if I was Brenda Condon's sister. Mm-hmm. And I said yes, and they wanted to know if I knew where she was, and I said, no, I don't know. And my first remark to the police officer was, how much money does she need for the speeding ticket this time?
Wow.
Because she was good at getting the speeding tickets, coming to me for the money to pay them the very next day. Mm-hmm. So he said, and he kept repeating, do you know where she is? Do you know, have you talked to her? No, but she'll be here tomorrow morning at my house because her kids will be here, and we're going to celebrate her birthday and my son's birthday. And then he told me that she had gone missing on Monday night, and that I needed to come and sign missing persons papers because I was the closest living relative of legal age to sign the papers because her kids were too young.
Right.
And that's when I met Greg, I met Carl, and the things just...
Okay.
I didn't like what I found.
All right, so the police call you, eventually tell you that Brenda's missing. And, of course, maybe at that point they don't go into all of the details, and we are surely going to go into all of the details. But what is important to me right at this moment is that you had mentioned that on that Friday you actually got to meet Carl and Greg for the first time, even though she had been dating Greg for a couple years. But like you said, maybe she didn't want you to meet him. She might, you might not have approved of him. Possibly. Uh-huh. Did either of those men, being that they knew Brenda, Carl, she worked for Carl, Greg's girlfriend, ever offer up their own theories about where Brenda could have gone, what could have happened, anything like that?
Well, what Greg told me going down to the bar from the police station was that Carl's girlfriend looked a lot like Brenda, and that possibly Carl owed somebody something, so they mistook Brenda for Carl's girlfriend. And I never got Carl's girlfriend's name, and I never met her or saw her. So I don't know if she looked like Brenda or not.
So maybe let me just put it another way. So Greg and Carl are friends, and it seems to me in a way that already Greg is selling Carl out.
Right.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. So, all right. And what about Carl? Did you ever have a chance to talk to him one-on-one? Being that Brenda was working for him, once again, not, months later, but right there at that time, when you first found out, you first encountered Carl, did he ever offer up a theory as to what could have happened to his employee?
No. He had no explanation whatsoever. Her car was outside the door of the bar. Her boots were in the men's restroom, which is a strange place to have your boots when the women's restroom is right next to the men's restroom across from the bar. And there was money, which was, whether it was change for drinks or tips, no one knows, but there were drinks left on the bar along with money on the bar.
Okay. Let me ask.
Missing her keys.
Yeah, let me ask you some specific questions about all of that. So are you saying that on that Monday night, so kind of Tuesday morning, I guess, Friday, February 27th into February 28th, so your impression, at least what you believe, is that Brenda was working the bar alone that night. She was the only employee that night.
Correct.
Okay. And once again, I know you were not there right after, she went missing on that Tuesday, but did it look like she had, I know bartenders, I've never been a bartender, but, they clean up, they put everything away. Did those things that look like they had been done or not?
No. They told me that it wasn't cleaned up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why. And on Tuesday, she was to open the bar up at 11 o'clock in the morning so that she could have that night off. And there was a cigarette person came in to redo the cigarette machines. And there was a carpet, a rug guy, where they bring in the mats and things that they use in front of the doors and things.
Sure.
They had both come in, and they saw her car, so they said they just figured she was back in the coolers or something, so they went about, did their thing, and left. But they had seen the money laying on the bar along with the drinks. And that's why they thought she was in the back somewhere.
Right, and
talking, and they did their thing, and then they left.
And I have to admit, it's not totally crazy. It kind of makes sense.
It does.
And we have to remember when we talk about a cigarette vending machine. Maybe for those of you who are too young, there used to be a time where you could buy cigarettes out of like vending machines, like have candy bars in them today, right? We're old enough to remember that, unfortunately, Iris, right? We're old enough to remember that.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You pay 25 cents a pack of cigarettes, too.
Okay, so these guys came in on Tuesday. Her car's there. It's unlocked. And they don't think anything of it, that they don't see Brenda there.
No.
Okay. You mentioned the boots. Her boots. Are these boots that she usually wore to bartend?
They were boots with heels on, and they were pretty good sized heels. I assume, again, I don't know, but she probably had taken another pair of shoes, flat ones, because when you're behind the bar running back and forth, heels are not something you want to look at. But I don't know whether she had taken a pair of sneakers with her that night and changed. I don't know. It just really seems so strange that you would put your boots into the men's restroom.
So once again, it wasn't the women's restroom where her boots were found.
No.
They were in the men's restroom, And were they just
Mm-hmm.
thrown on the ground? How were they explained to you? Were they neatly sitting
They
there,
were
or what?
sitting there. Yeah, just sitting there.
Huh. Okay. And of course, we know that Brenda is missing, but my understanding, once again from my notes, is that her purse was
Mm-hmm.
never found and her car keys were never found.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know what happened to her car? Being that, did Greg get it? Did somebody in your
No,
family
the
get it? What
police.
did what did the police do with it?
No, the police took it and they tore it all apart to see if they could find anything. And then they sold the car. And I had told the police department that when that car was done, I wanted it. It was a Mercury Capri. It was a special model of
Yeah.
a car, and there wasn't many of them made. But after the police was done with it, they sold it to some guy down in that area somewhere. They never notified me like I had told them because I wanted it, because I thought that it would be nice for the kids to have her car, and I was going to get it, but they never notified me.
Wow. All right. So allegedly, seemingly, they did try to do some forensics on it, but other than that, they didn't give it back to you. They didn't give it to Greg. They just sold it and
No.
took the money for themselves.
Yeah, because there was never anything mentioned about any money or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was the car paid off? Did she own it outright? Do you know?
You know what? I don't remember. That's been so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Okay. So let me maybe just sum this up for the listeners. We've gone through quite a few facts there. So on Tuesday morning, on Monday night, Brenda goes to work. I'm going to take for granted there were other people working with her, at least for a little while. But when around closing time came, she's by herself. And seemingly something happened that she did not go home. Her car remained there overnight. And the next morning, the bar was unlocked, so presumably it was unlocked all night, strangely enough.
Right.
And to the point where a couple vendors came in, did their thing, and left, not seeing Brenda, but not thinking much about it. They just thought, well, maybe she's in the bathroom, or whoever knows, who knows, and left. And then finally, who was it necessarily who discovered that, on that Tuesday? Was it Carl? Was it another employee that discovered, hey, something happened to Brenda?
It was another employee that the 5 o'clock bartender that was coming in to relieve her. I have no idea what his name was. I never was told, and I never asked. But he figured the same thing, that she was back in the cooler or something, and because her car was outside. So he yelled for her and looked for her, and then he called Greg and asked Greg if he knew where she was. And Greg said, well, she had never come home the night before, and he just thought she went to Clearfield or something and was at work. And see, this is what doesn't make any sense to me. If you're the boyfriend and your girlfriend does not come home from work, why aren't you up looking for her, making phone calls, trying to find her? But he just nonchalantly went to work at his gas station Tuesday and never did anything until the guy called from the bar and wanted to know if he knew where Brenda was.
So what you're saying is Brenda doesn't come home, once again, early Tuesday morning, doesn't come home to Greg, and at no time does it seem he drove to the bar. He didn't call you, he didn't call anybody else in Brenda's family, didn't call any of her friends, and didn't even call the police.
No.
Okay. All right. Those are the facts that we just present them. We're not trying to point fingers or anything, but as far as Iris knows, and Iris knows her sister's disappearance as well as anybody, that's what she is saying. Okay. And then it wasn't until that Friday, then March 3rd, that you see Greg down at the police station. And then this is when he gives you the story. Well, Brenda kind of looked like Carl's girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So let's move on to some of these items. So Brenda's missing. They take her car. We have this weird combination of facts about the place that the boots, the place is unlocked, but her keys and purse are missing. Why would she leave without at least locking the place up? These are some things that are hard to understand. Okay.
Right.
Do the police speak to Greg about his alibi? Of course, you've already stated here is a guy working on cars and he doesn't have a driver's license. Did he take a lie detector test? What was his status with the police? Did they look at him, in your opinion?
By before the police ask any of us to take a lie detector test. And I always thought that when the police wanted a lie detector test, you had to do it. So I did one. Her ex-husband Tom did one. Greg did one. And we all passed as far as, with his lie detector test. They asked Carl. Carl flatly refused. And that's when I come to find out that if the police request that you take a lie detector test, you can refuse.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I never knew that.
Of course, yes.
Never knew that at all. So then what the police told me was that Carl had studied at Penn State criminology. He didn't graduate, but he took enough courses and things to know how to work and get around the system.
Okay. That's just your opinion. We just have to keep that in mind. But we'll just keep this simple. Carl was asked to take a lie detector test, and he refused to do so.
Correct.
All right. But Greg did take one, and to your knowledge, 30 years later, he passed it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and we will come back to that. Of course, Carl, you had stated that when you did go over to the tavern later that week, he didn't even want to talk to you. He was kind of avoided you.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now,
because I had.
Please, I'm sorry. Please.
Okay. When I got there that night, I asked him to see the bank deposit slip because I know when I always worked as a bartender, we always closed out the register and we made up a bank deposit. And if I could see the slip, I would know whether it was her handwriting or not. And I didn't care about the money amount, nothing. I just wanted to know if it was in her handwriting. And he flatly refused to let me see it.
Do you even know if the bank deposit was even made that night, whether she signed it or not? Do you even know?
I don't know. No. Because I asked the police to make him show me that, and they told me that they couldn't.
Okay. All right. So there's certainly something maybe suspicious there, but what do you believe the process is? Would Brenda have locked up and gone directly to the bank? Do you think that would have been the situation, or and you say you have bartending experience. What do you think the proper procedure is?
Right. The money would have been put somewhere in the bar so that when the owner or the manager came in the next day to pick the money up, they knew where to get the money because it was not always kept in safes. There was money in the safe, but usually bank deposits were left somewhere else in the building.
Okay. And once again, 30 years later, you do not know if that bank deposit was there. Maybe it disappeared with Brenda. Maybe this was a robbery, for example. Okay. Now, regarding, you said that Brenda's ex-husband, Tom, please, if you want to add something, go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm sorry. If it was a robbery, why was there so much money left on the bar? Because if they were after the money, they would have taken the cash money that was on the bar.
I have to agree with you. I don't have an easy answer for that. One thing that does come to mind, once again, we don't do any theorizing on the program, but maybe we should look at this in a different way. Is it possible that maybe a customer came in the next day, being that everything was unlocked and nobody was there, and this person decided to have himself or herself a drink and didn't want to steal, so they just left the money there and left? Is that possible?
No,
No?
I don't think so, because what was told to me, there was numerous drinks on the bar and change at each one of these drinks.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. You're giving us a much clearer picture on that. That it does. Once again, this is one of those disappearances where you have a bunch of different facts, and it's hard trying to connect them logically. So, okay, very good. What about Brenda's ex-husband? You said that he did take a polygraph test and passed, Tom?
Right. Yes.
All right.
Yes, he passed.
Okay, and just do we have to ask, do you even know what his alibi was for that night? How close did he live to Carlsbad Tavern?
He lived about 45 miles away.
Wow, so not close.
Depending on, it was not close, no.
Okay.
And he said he was at home. And to this day, I believe Tom that he was at home.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't think Tom ever had it in him to do something like that to the mother of his children, because they got along. If they fought, it would have been different, but they didn't.
Okay. Did Tom ever offer up his own theory, being that he knew Brenda well? They were married for a while. He got to see her when, kids got together. Did he ever offer up a theory as to what he thought happened to Brenda in the times you've talked to you personally, not what you heard him say at other people? All right, so he pointed the finger at Greg.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we've gone over the facts of that night, obviously, and we're going to come to a few other things here in a moment regarding that night, but we've gone over some of the men in Brenda's life. We've gone over the facts of the way the bar was, when these vendors showed up, when this other bartender showed up. We have these boots. We have money on the bar, the top of the bar. Looks like she didn't clean up before she left, but not only is she missing, her purse is missing, her car keys are missing. Her car, though, is still outside, and the place is unlocked. Okay, let's move on to this. Now, there is another angle to her disappearance, and it has to do with, it seems at some point, some of the people who were there that night on Monday night at the Carlsbad Tavern were tracked down, and what did they have to say? And my understanding is some of them could give sketches of other people, mainly men, who were in there. What can you say about that? When did these sketches come out?
Oh, probably a week after she had been reported missing. There was 3 people supposed in the bar, and there were people from the composite drawings that I was shown and that the police published were 3 completely different guys.
Yeah.
One probably was maybe mid-30s, one maybe early 50-ish, and then one that was probably in his 60s who happened to be balding, but yet the first guy, the youngest guy, had a full head of jet black hair.
Of hair.
So how did 3 people see the same guy but give such difference in the ages and what they look like?
Yeah, that's hard to understand. They could have just all been looking at different men. I guess I don't, on the other hand, I don't know how busy it would have been on a Monday night in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, in a bar. I don't know.
I don't think very busy at all.
Okay, all right. Good point. All right, so these sketches come out, so it does seem that police did try to figure out, maybe using credit card receipts or something. I'm guessing that bar has a lot of regulars as well. Being able to track some people down who did see Brenda that night, and that's where these sketches came from. And we will be coming back to these sketches. And in fact, by the time that listeners are hearing our voices, I will have made sure that everybody gets to see those sketches for themselves. You had stated at some point after this all happened that you thought you were being followed. Can you talk about that until November? So we're talking this happened in February. So 10 months, 9 months later, you thought you were being followed. So why don't you tell the listeners about that, why that even occurred to you? Tell us some of the circumstances.
Well, I lived on one side of town, and I was working on the other side of town at a gas station convenience store. So I would open up at 6 in the morning, so I was leaving around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure that I was there. I had everything set up and ready and opened and running and everything. And really felt like it was on me. It was just, I never saw anybody. There was never a vehicle, but I had the weirdest feeling that somebody was following me. And it was only early in the mornings when I would leave the house to go to work that I had it. It didn't happen in the afternoon or evening. It was only in the mornings. And it lasted until November. And then one day I went to go to work, and it was like, there's nobody watching me today.
Yeah, I have to ask, do you think this, being that you can't point a finger on it, you didn't say, well, there was this car or this guy hanging outside my house or anything? Do you think that this just could have been, of course, losing a sister to a disappearance, traumatic. Do you look back at it now and thinking maybe it was just a little bit of that going on, or maybe in your subconscious, maybe you were noticing someone, it just wasn't obvious? What do you think?
I think there was someone, but I just never saw that person.
Okay. All right. And then so for around 9-10 months, this is this feeling that you had, and unfortunately not being able to connect it with anybody. It certainly would have been interesting if you'd have noticed somebody and he matched one of the sketches that came out of Brenda's disappearance. Obviously, that would be a big deal. All right, let's talk about Greg and Carl just a little bit. Now, they are friends, or they were friends?
Yes, they were friends.
And to remind everybody, was it through Greg that Brenda got this job at Carl's?
Yes.
All right.
It was.
Okay. Now, through the grapevine, did either of them, anything that got back to you, realize that, what Greg said about Carl's, Brenda looking like Carl's girlfriend, and Carl never did offer up an opinion, but anything through the grapevine, anything that got back to you, maybe not in the next year, 5 years, about what Greg or Carl said about Brenda's disappearance? Did any, through the grapevine, did anything ever get back to you about what they said?
Nothing. No. Nothing at all. It was just all very hush-hush.
Okay.
The only information I got was when I would call the police. And Spring Township Police would not give it to Rockview State Police till about 5 years later.
Okay.
They flatly refused to give it to someone who had the ways and means that they could have done forensics on the things, but by the time they turned it over to the state police, everything was gone. The bar had closed, and I think it became a pizza shop or something, and, there was nothing left there for the state police to work with.
Right, 5 years, long time in disappearances. Long time. Now, I think the listeners know your attitude toward Greg is not very good for a multitude of reasons, I think. But what did he do with his life after Brenda disappeared? I have to ask, did he get another girlfriend quickly?
He had another girlfriend. Yeah, it appeared that he had a girlfriend almost immediately after Brenda had vanished.
Okay. Do any of those sketches of those men look like Greg?
Not really.
Not
No,
really.
because the one that looked to be like 60, the facial features are not Greg's facial features.
Okay. And maybe we have to remind everybody, we know that he didn't have a license. That doesn't mean he couldn't have driven a car, but how far did Greg live from Carlsbad Tavern?
I'm going to say probably between 15, 20 miles from State College to Bellefonte.
Okay. Okay. Can you think of any reason? Of course, we already talked about how, Greg seemingly got another girlfriend, what you would say quickly after Brenda went missing. Can you think of any reason, though, that Greg would have traveled all those miles to do something to harm Brenda? Anything that comes to mind?
If Brenda had information that could have been used against him or Carl, yes, I could see him doing it.
Because of their illegal activity?
Right, yes.
Okay. Now, regarding Carl, you said that I guess Carlsbad Tavern didn't last too long. You said it became a pizza place. Do you have any? I got some information for you, but that I will tell you about here in a moment. But any idea what he did with his life in the years after?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, you should know that Carl now lives here in Florida with us, Iris. In Florida,
my God.
I'm not going to name the city that he lives in. It's not my city. It's not your city. In fact, I haven't even looked it up in a map. But he is still with us, and he moved to Florida. But you should know this, and the listeners should also know this. I looked up his criminal record. One charge. That's it. And I don't even know what that charge is. It just tells me that there is one thing on his record, and that might not even be a felony. It very well could just be some sort of speeding ticket or something. Okay? So I'm not sure what to think of that. It does sound to me like hanging out with Greg and everything, because Greg eventually did have a cocaine conviction in 2010. Yes. That it would seem that Carl might be in some illegal activity as well, but according to his criminal record, and there are all sorts of different databases out there, but this one I feel is like usually like 90% pretty true. Only one thing on there, so I just want you to know that. I don't know how that affects your opinion, but there's only one thing on his criminal record, so the listeners should keep that in mind as well. Now, let's move on to this. I'm not sure what there have been, and maybe I'll just talk here for a little bit myself, Iris. There have been some other women who have gone missing or been murdered in that kind of the central Pennsylvania area. One of them is Catherine Heckel. Another one is Dawn Miller. And another woman is Barbara Miller. I have no idea if those two are related. But Catherine's ex-lover was charged with her murder not until 2015. Dawn Miller, last seen with her boyfriend. That's usually not a good sign, but to my knowledge, that case is still unsolved, whether the boyfriend did it or somebody else did it. And then Barbara Miller, the boyfriend, who is a police officer, continues to be the number one suspect. The way you look at it in these, do any of these cases ever been connected to Brenda's disappearance in any way? Maybe I should ask you this. In Barbara Miller's, do we even know where this boyfriend was a cop? Was he a cop in Bellefonte? Do we even know?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So I guess what we're saying is we just have to keep in mind there are some unsolved murders or disappearances in that area that the listeners might want didn't could be in some way connected, and we're gonna get to a name that has been prominent here before it's all over, and might have to do with one of the sketches. But I wanted to also tell you about. I wanted to ask you about your experience with John Walsh's show, of something that you told me in trying to get attention for Brenda's disappearance. What was your experience like with that?
Well, I wrote him a letter, and the response I got back was it wasn't gory enough because there was no blood, there was no body, nothing that people was interested in.
Wow. When did this happen?
It was shortly after she had disappeared, probably during the summertime when I had contacted him.
Mm-hmm. And that's what this, of course, this is 1991. This is before cell phones and email and texts and everything.
Yeah.
You wrote them a letter, and they sent you a letter back, and that's what it said.
Yeah, it wasn't gory. Nobody was interested in it. You know, why people want gory blood and guts, I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking for another human being, I don't understand that. You know,
yeah.
She was a person. She was a sister. She was a mother. She was a wife. She was a girlfriend. You know, she like you and me.
Yeah.
And then to say that, well, she disappeared, but the story isn't gory and bloody enough to make a show out of it.
Well, I know that is a criteria that's still used 30 years later for a lot of crime shows, true crime shows. Unfortunately, it's just amazing to me that somebody would be so straightforward enough to put it in a letter and actually write it down, because that's kind of still the unspoken thing to this day. I'm not saying that like a show like Disappeared was like that. It seems to me that they covered a lot of disappearances. Of course, most of them, we don't even talk about blood or DNA or anything because there's usually nothing. But other types of true crime shows certainly rely on the sensational and, visuals and things like that because it's easier for them to market program. That's just a fact. I don't care about that, but so 30 years ago, it seems like that was still a criteria. We're not saying that John Walsh thinks like that at all, but somebody on the production staff, that's the letter that he or she sent you.
Right.
Okay. That is disgusting. Okay. Let's move on to this. Now, this is where the sketches now come back into the picture. When was the first time you heard the name James Robert Cruz? Where were you? When was it?
I saw it on TV, on the news. I don't remember exactly when it was.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I would hear anything about missing people on the news, whether it was TV or radio, my ears were like a dog's. They just perked up, and I'm drawn to whatever they're talking about on the news.
Yeah.
And when this one came up, it was like, okay, go see it, go watch it, and then follow it and see what happens. And
I have the details. If you do not know some of the details, I'll fill them in. But why was that even on your radar? Because he had killed a woman in the Bellefonte area.
Right. And I think her body was found in a dumpster. And it wasn't at the bar that Brenda was at, but it wasn't very far away. It was close to Interstate 80 and an exit. And the bar was out in the country. It wasn't right in downtown Bellefonte. It was out in a rural area.
Okay. And and what year was this?
I don't remember.
Okay, I just want to say, I have it in my notes that James Robert Cruz murdered Dawn Birnbaum and put her in a dumpster in Bellefonte in 1993. So roughly 2 years after 2
2 years.
years after Brenda went missing, and he was a truck driver. Now, I know that you've seen a picture of James Robert Cruz, maybe not recently, but would you say that he looks like one of the guys in the sketches?
Yes, he looks like the young one with the black curly hair. But I don't think he had black curly hair. His was more of a blondish red color.
Okay, and by the time the listeners are hearing our voices for this episode that will come out the first Friday in April, I will have posted a picture of James Robert Cruz next to a picture that we're talking about from the sketches, and the people can make that judgment for themselves. Now, so you first heard about him a couple years later, I'm guessing when this crime happened. And do you know, over the last 28 years since he became name got into the public, do you know if the police have looked at him as a possibility of being involved in Brenda's disappearance?
From the information that I've got from the police department, because the ones that originally they've retired, so they've got new people along the way. And when I talked to the one, I asked him if I could go to the prison where this Cruz guy was, just to ask him if he was in the bar that night and if he knew of my sister. And they told me no, I couldn't do it.
Okay. All right. And so do you even know if the new officers on the case here in the 21st century, do you know if at some point they've even tried to talk to James Cruz? Do you even know?
I have no idea. No.
Okay. And this is important. The listeners should know that that James Cruz was a truck driver who drove through that area all the time, right there around 80. So this is what also puts him in the vicinity of where Brenda was working that night. And once again, the listeners will make those decisions for themselves. So it seems to me that the way you think about this, Iris, is that, I know you seem to suspect Greg, but it seems like could be a few different suspects in this.
Yes.
Okay.
As time has gone by, yeah, I've added.
Right. Okay. Maybe I should ask you this. Of course, Brenda had friends, and I'm sure you got to talk to them back then, and maybe you still keep in touch with some of them. I would never ask you to say any of their names, but have they ever offered up any of their theories as to what happened to Brenda?
They really don't have any idea other than everybody pointed a finger at Greg. That was the number one person.
Right. Okay. All right. So we've gone through this perplexing disappearance. Like I said, facts that seem to contradict each other. It seems like a robbery, but like you said, money left on the counter. Her keys and purse are missing, but her car is still there. The boots in the men's restroom. No signs of violence in the bar. And it's been over 30 years. What have the last 30 years been like, Iris? Of course, as you started talking about, you were a mother figure to Brenda. You weren't just her sister, but you kind of raised her. I mean, how bad have the last 30 years been?
Pretty bad. It's always there. You don't forget. And maybe you drive by a place or something that Brenda and I had gone to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of memories, and they pop into your head, and different things. It's like, oh, if Brenda was here, we would be doing this together. It's hard because you don't know where she is or what happened to her. And she grew up without her mother. She would have never left her kids to grow up without a mother like she did. And I just feel that someone took her for whatever reason and decided that her time on this earth was done.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, knowing Brenda and the kids were 9 and 11, she would have never gone away on her own and left those kids with no contact. And she always came to my house all the time, and if I wasn't there, she'd leave me a note. She'd call me on the phone, so we kept in contact a lot, and if I didn't hear anything from her for a couple of days, I didn't think too much about it because I knew she'd come popping back in the door or something, and it's just, it's like, even now sometimes I think, well, she might not know where I live at, but she would find out where I lived at so that she could come popping in my door like she always did.
Yeah. When we got together, once again, it seems like yesterday, but I'm guessing maybe it's like 2 months ago now. Yeah, time flies. But, and we would not mention, maybe you have mentioned their names, but we don't maybe want to go into too many details. But, both of Brenda's children have come up to be very industrious, good people, right? Her son and daughter.
Right, yes.
In fact, you told me, her son got into some businesses that I didn't know anything about. I remember us talking about that, and it's something that I didn't know anything about, but, he's done very well for himself in that particular business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Of course, your father, was he still alive at the time of Brenda's disappearance?
No.
No.
He had passed in 1985.
Oh, okay. And what about, of course, you mentioned that you have these brothers too, 3 brothers. How has this affected them? How did this affect them? Do they feel the same way you do, being suspicious of Greg and maybe other people surrounding that bar at the time?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Because again, they feel that she would never have walked away from her kids because the kids meant so much to her.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe I should ask you this. Being that you didn't, know that she was missing, once again, you have your own life to live. Just like I have 2 brothers and a sister, I may not talk to them for days at a time, and I'm close to them. So that's how things are. But, we know about Greg seemingly not doing anything that next day when his wife doesn't come home, and he's just going about whatever he's doing. But were there any other people that recognized, maybe with this cleaning business that she had, that they started looking around? Do you know anything about that? These other people that she did other things with that, did not realize or realized?
Because they were in Williamsport and Clearfield. So I had never met any of the girls that she had working for her. And the cleaning jobs that she did in Clearfield, she did by herself.
Okay.
So, I didn't need any of her employees.
Okay. So really what you're saying is that Greg was the only person in her immediate orbit, I guess you might say, would have been the one to sound the alarm, fairly quickly, but he didn't do it.
Right.
Okay. Iris, do you have a Facebook page, a website, etc., anything like that set up for Brenda's disappearance that we can direct the listeners to?
No, I don't. The only thing there is just on missing persons. There is a site that someone put up there whenever she disappeared. And they have pictures of her, or a picture of her, and pictures of the 3 composite drawings that the people in the bar said that what the guy looked like. Those are on that site, but that's it.
But did I not see that there is something through Weebly, Weebly, There's some website, and I can check this maybe right here. Or maybe I'm thinking of something totally different, but I could have sworn. Let me see something very quickly.
I don't know.
Let me see. Yeah, there. Believe it or not, I don't know who runs it, but there is a BrendaCondon.com. There is set up by somebody. You might want to look into that.
Wow.
It's powered by Weebly. It has her picture there missing. I don't know who set this up. I've not had a chance to go through it page by page, but I guess that could be something we could direct the listeners to. But once again, it's BrendaCondon.com. You might want to check it out, and it's through the website company Weebly, which is. So I don't know who runs it. That might be something you maybe want to look at. It doesn't really say here who runs it or anything. So it does seem that there's some other cases that are featured on there, but it is BrendaCondon.com. So maybe you want to check that out and look it over, see if that seems like a good website. And if so, I will link to it so the listeners, check it out page by page. So if you think it's good, I will make sure that everybody knows about it, being that it's not something you created.
Okay.
Because
no, I didn't even know it was there.
It's there. I was going to say I thought there was something.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. So you check it out. Let me know what you think of it, and if you think that it gets at least most of the facts and circumstances correct, then I will surely link to it for the listeners so they can check it out.
They've even got Greg's information on here too.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Might want to find out somebody's doing you a great favor there, Iris, and your family. So it'd be interesting to know who it is. I don't know. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Iris, any final words before we complete this interview?
Not really. It's just that I wish somebody would come forth with some information because I still feel that there's somebody out there that knows exactly what happened to Brenda.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree with you. Once again, we don't do theories, but this does feel like a disappearance where, multiple people saw her that night. There's a combination of facts that it does seem like maybe somebody did make some mistakes here and there. No crime is perfect. And as you stated, although maybe some of the recent disappearances on Unfound, I do believe that people walked off. This is not going to be one of those. This is certainly one where I believe that there was foul play. Why? Who? Not sure, but certainly foul play of some type. And when that is the situation, we would hope that if somebody knew something, somebody would come forward. But I agree with you. But, Iris, we've known each other for a few years now. And we're going to continue to know each other. I want to try to continue to assist you with this. And really, I hope we can get together in person again sometime soon.
Okay.
Surely.
It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. We had a really good time. I enjoyed talking to you. We talked about a bunch of things, not just Brenda's disappearance, and I really enjoyed that. So, and because of that, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Well, I thank you for having me because after 30 years, if somebody can come forward with some information, the family would greatly appreciate it.
Right. We'll do all we can, and we've known each other for a few years, and we're going to continue to know each other until this case is solved. I can assure you that, Iris, and so I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was my March 24th, 2021 interview with Iris Myers, sister of Brenda Condon. I thank her for joining me and all of you on the program.
Iris is another guest who I've known for a few years now. I'm ecstatic that she got to appear on Unfound. I also enjoyed meeting her in person a couple months ago. I mentioned the disappearance and murder of Jessica Haringa in the summary at the beginning of this episode, because it shares many similarities to Brenda's case, mainly that both women were working night shifts alone. I would also add that they are alike in that there were a multitude of clues in each. For Jessica's, we had a witness noticing a van at the back of the store. There was also blood inside the building where she worked. There was also the video showing which way the killer's van went. With Brenda's, we have the sketches, the boots, her purse and keys being missing, and a lot of other information that kind of paint a picture for us. By the way, Jessica's killer and his accomplice were caught, yet she has still not been found. Having said all that, and this goes to who killed Jessica and who possibly killed Brenda, there's one huge difference between these young women's cases. It is now known that Jessica's killer staked out that convenience store. He knew Jessica from having gone into the store many times. He calculated his opportunity because he knew there were long periods of time when Jessica was the only one inside that building. How could he do this? Because Jessica had been working at the store for a lot longer than a few days. Whereas with Brenda's, she had only been working at the tavern for less than a week. Surely not enough time for an attacker to calculate when to come into the bar and take her. Meaning this had to be someone who decided to do this on the spur of the moment, simply because he and she were the only two in the building. I think what I'm saying is the circumstances of each point to two different kinds of killers, even though the general facts of the crimes are the same, with Jessica's killer being much more calculating, while Brenda's, he's an instinctual type of predator, not needing all the probabilities when deciding what to do. He simply attacks. As for the other facts, the boots, the glasses and money, the unlocked door, Brenda's purse and keys also being missing, these are also still very important. We certainly can't leave them alone. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.